Well, good evening. Glad to see each of you here tonight. If you would, go ahead and stand with me. We'll begin our song service by singing hymn 58, When I See the Blood. Hymn 58. Christ our Redeemer died on the cross, died for the sinner, paid all his due. All who receive him need never fear. Yes, he will pass over you. When I see the blood, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Chiefest of sinners, Jesus can save. As he has promised, so will he do. O sinner, hear him, trust in his word, then he will pass over you. When I see the blood, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Judgment is coming, all who'll be there, who have rejected, who have refused. O sinner, hasten, let Jesus in, then God will pass over you. When I see the blood, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Oh, what compassion, oh, boundless love, Jesus hath power, Jesus is true. All who believe are safe from the storm. Oh, he will pass over you. When I see the blood, when I see the blood, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Good singing this evening. Sorry. If we could have a couple of our men make way for the offering at this time. Is it not yet? Yeah. And then open us in word of prayer. All right, Brother Kyle, do you mind opening us in word of prayer?
Our most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you, Lord, for being able to be in your house this evening, Lord. I pray that you bless the offering that you're about to receive. I pray that you would pass the words to speak, Lord. Our hearts be receptive to the word, Lord, that we would be able to take this message home with us, Lord, and apply it to our lives and our daily walk with you, Lord. And I just thank you for all that you do for us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, good evening and welcome to Bible Baptist Church. So glad that you're here and made the choice to be in the Lord's house here this evening. And of course, we'll talk more during the prayer time. We got a lot of folks dealing with hospital stays and issues. And of course, we got several folks that either are going or have already gone down kind of south and east dealing with tornado stuff. I know Andy and his wife were up here on the work day on Monday. And just a little after lunchtime, he goes, well, we got to leave. We just got deployed to go down to the Houston area. And so They got sent down there to assess electrical grid and damage down there. And so, anyways, I'm so glad that you're able to be here this evening, and so glad to be in the Lord's house here tonight. Well, if you've gotten involved in everything that's been going on at the church here of recent, you've seen a lot of each other here over the last few days. Of course, we had services Sunday, and then Monday we had a work day up here. Yesterday we had the get-together at the Mexican food place and fundraiser game night deal there. Of course, church tonight. We got another work day tomorrow. And then, Lord willing, nothing on Friday. And then Saturday, we got visitation. So I'm looking forward to all that's going on this week. And then again, Sunday, of course, church. And so it's going to be a very full week, but a good week. And so I hope you'll get involved as much as you're able to. And if you were able to have a part in the Taco Tuesday we had yesterday, I hope you enjoyed that time. It was a blessing. Amen. Well, I just have a few announcements here tonight by way of announcement. Is just the VBS dates. Just want to go over those really briefly here with you. And if you haven't taken the time to grab one of the handouts back at the bulletin board that has all these dates on it, I encourage you to get a hold of those. And that way you're up to date on all that's going on with Bible school on the dates. And, of course, we have this upcoming Thursday, tomorrow, another work day that'll start at 8 a.m. And, again, it'll go as long as people want it to. And so if you want to come and work after work or in the morning or in the afternoon, whatever you want to do, or you just want to be here all day and hang out, that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it again. We made good progress on Monday, and feel like we got a lot of stuff accomplished. And then this upcoming Saturday is our big VBS visitation. And so I encourage you to come and participate in that if you're able to. What we're going to do is have a job for everybody. And so there'll be some, if you'd like to go out and just try to locate some kiddos, just kind of cold door knocking. We'll also, I've got a list of the kids that came last year, particularly those that said they were unchurched when they registered, that have not maybe registered yet this year, that people can follow up with. And then also we've got all the mailers to get together. So if you're not one who wants to talk to somebody, we got all the mailers that are going in the mailboxes to get ready to go out next week. It's a lot of different jobs and projects on Saturday. And I encourage you to come be a part of that. That'll be from 10 to noon that will be doing that, and the more the merrier. We'll have jobs for everyone. Hope you'll come out and dedicate just a little bit of your time to encourage someone to sign up for Bible school. Just give you an update on that. I checked right before service tonight. We are at currently 64 kids that have registered. And so just give you a point of reference, last year at this time we were sitting somewhere in the 30s of kids registered. And so we'll see kind of what the final numbers look like on the pre-registration deal there. And sure looking forward to Bible school this year. It's going to be a blast. Okay. Also, then let me just go over the rest of the dates here. The following Monday will be our last work day. So the next Monday, Sunday night after church, we'll kind of move some stuff around in here, clear off the platform. And then Monday, we'll start filling it back in with all the stuff we've been making. And so that's the plan. So Monday really is, in my opinion, the best work day, because you kind of get the, instead of seeing all the little pieces, you get to start seeing it all come together and make the big picture. And the plan is to have it all done Monday. Now, we'll see if that actually happens or not. But that's the goal, is to finish it all up Monday, have all the decorations completely done with that. And then, of course, Bible school will start that following Monday and go Monday through Friday. And then Sunday, we'll have a VBS Sunday here at the church. And, of course, encourage you all to come and be a part of that. That's going to be a lot of fun. If you are unable to be here at the VBS meeting on Sunday and you would like to participate in this year's Bible school by way of being a worker and helping, even if you're just going to be here for a part of it, you can't be here all 5 days, that's fine. If you could just visit with me, and that way we can get you a job. You can either text me or call me or even catch me tonight. The sooner we do that, the better. That way we can get you taken care of. Also, if you're planning on working in VBS and you were not at the meeting Sunday night, you need to get with my wife about a shirt. Have you ordered those? Tomorrow morning she's ordering those, so it's got to be tonight. So if you are wanting a worker shirt and you weren't here Sunday night, or you need to make a change to what you put down Sunday night, or if you didn't get the sheet Sunday night somehow and you were here for that meeting, you'll need to get with my wife and get all of that taken care of here this evening. All right, well, that's it by way of announcements of all that's going on Bible school-wise. Of course, there's a lot more coming up, but I encourage you to visit the bulletin board and make yourself aware of all that's happening there. So let's take our Bibles here tonight and go to the book of Joshua and chapter number 1. We've started a new series entitled it Moving Forward, and trusting that God would help us as a church in spiritual ways, and physical ways, and fiscal ways, and every way to move forward. And we're not wanting to stay stagnant, because stagnant means you're moving backwards usually. And so we want to be moving forward, and I believe Joshua is a great book to look at in regard to that. And so we're in Joshua chapter number 1. And if you found your place there and are able to, let's stand together as we honor the reading of God's Word. Joshua and chapter number 1. Last week we dealt with this idea that they needed to move forward. There had been a previous generation that unfortunately had some failure, and they had learned from that failure and said, we're going to make right choices moving forward. Now, I'm thankful as a church we have a previous generation that made right choices, but that is just a foundation for us to build upon and say, hey, as a church, let's pick up that mantle that's been passed to us, and we don't have the right to change it or fumble it or mess it up, but actually to make it better and to take it and to run with it. The baton's been passed to us. So we're in Joshua chapter 1. We're going to start reading there in verse number 10, and we'll read down to the end of the chapter. It says, Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, Pass through the host, and command the people, saying, Prepare you victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan, to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you to possess it. And to the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh spake Joshua, saying, Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, The Lord your God hath given you rest, and hath given you this land. Your wives and your little ones, and your cattle, shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side Jordan, but ye shall pass before your brethren armed, all the mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord have given your brethren rest, as he hath given you. And they also have possessed the land which the Lord your God giveth them. Then ye shall return unto the land of your possession, and enjoy it, which Moses, the Lord's servant, gave you on this side Jordan toward the sun rising. And they answered Joshua, saying, All that thou commandest us, we will do. And whithersoever thou sendest us, we will go. According as we hearkened unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses. Whosoever he be that doth rebel against thy commandments, and will not hearken unto thy words in all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. Only be strong and of a good courage. So I've titled the message here tonight, Forward with Godly Leadership. Forward with Godly Leadership. So may God bless the reading of his word. You can be seated. And thank you for standing in honor of the scriptures here tonight. I do want to preface the message here tonight because I always come to messages like this with a little trepidation, a little hesitation because it deals with submission to leadership and those who God puts in charge. So I say this, I preach the message, I try to address these passages as if I were a guest pastor going in to encourage a church to follow their pastor. And God's helped me understand it to preach it that way because I kind of got the opportunity to go through some of that transition when we left Kaufman and we came here, instructing the church there, hey, as I've been your pastor here, now there's going to be somebody else, and teaching the church how to reverence the office, not necessarily the man. And so when we go through this, hopefully we can kind of address it in that way. You'll receive it that way. I can preach it that way of, hey, if God tarries his coming, and if we get our way, I want to be here for forever, That's kind of our attitude towards it. But I also know God's divine plan is not always what our plan is. And so understanding texts like this help us to understand to reverence the office, not just the one who's holding that position at that time. And so with that in mind, let's kind of jump into here Joshua chapter 1, verses 10 through 18. Now, in 2010, there were men that were trapped in a hopeless situation, but they were led to victory by one man's leadership. This happened in, again, 2010 in Chile. A mine collapsed there, and it left 33 miners stranded about a half mile underground in a copper mine. It's kind of a crazy story of what took place there. There was a man by the name of Luis Urenza. He was the foreman of the group for that shift, and he had been working in that mine for nearly 3 decades. So almost 30 years he had been working in this copper mine. He knew it very well, and he knew this when the mine collapsed. He said this, the situation is not good. We're in a dire situation. Things are not looking well, and understanding the circumstances that he was with, he took his role as a leader far beyond just a shift manager. He knew if these men, these other 32 men, are going to survive, they were looking to him for leadership. And so he actually did some amazing things. Luis drew up maps of the mine. He organized and designated areas for sleeping, sanitation, and for work. He set up 12-hour shifts for the men to work to keep things going. And he used lights on the equipment to simulate daytime and nighttime so that their sleeping patterns could be held in a regular way. Food, which was only supposed to last them for 48 hours, was rationed out by Luis, and the men were only allowed very small spoonfuls every 24 hours, just enough to keep them alive. Slimy, muddy water used on the equipment was used for drinking water, and they stayed down in that mine with food that was only supposed to last 48 days. They stayed down there for 69 days in this mine. That's incredible. Over 2 months, they were half a mile under the earth in this copper mine. Now, what should have been a situation where 69 days later, they expected to get into that mine and find 33 corpses. To their amazement, one after the other, man after man came out of that mine. 32, followed by one final guy, the last guy that came out of the mine. Luis himself emerged with these words, "It's been a bit of a long shift." It's been a bit of a long shift. Now I'll say this, that just shows the optimism the man had. I would dare say this, those men would have all died unless they had a leader. There was a leader in that mine who led them. His calm, optimistic demeanor, his leadership throughout 2-month ordeal, which should have ended tragically, instead is a story that's heralded as one of the greatest examples of leadership that we have in the modern era. Now, when we consider leadership, we understand this. It used to be a famous statement, everything rises and falls on leadership. And that's true in every area of life. And maybe God's given you a role as a leader here tonight where you can make some application to these points. Maybe God's given you a role as a leadership at work. Maybe you're in a position where you're over a group of people. Maybe you're over the company. Whatever that case might be, maybe at work, you're looked to and you're the leader. You're the owner, you're the CEO, you're the manager, you're the boss, and people look to you for leadership. Men, I say this, you are a leader in your home. Maybe it is that your wife and your kids, they look to you for that leadership. But I'd like to look at the text here tonight. I believe what really is the main idea is that of leadership in ministry. Leadership in the role of a God-placed man over an organization or over a group, we'd say a church, and the leadership role that is there, and what that ought to look like from the leadership perspective, and what that ought to look like from those who are following the leadership as well. Because as much of a great leader as this man was down in the mine, we'd understand if there was an unwillingness to follow that leadership, the whole plan might have fallen apart. And so we not only have that example, strong leadership, but also strong desire to follow right leadership. And so I'd like to look here in Joshua at how God shows us how we are to be right leaders, but also how we are to respond and follow right leadership as well. Now, we understand this, we talked about it last week, that Moses is dead. We cannot overemphasize that phrase. This must have been a terrifying moment, not only for the nation, but also for Joshua himself. So when it makes that statement that Moses, God's leader over Israel, was dead, it is a tremendous thing that happened. Now, Joshua was not new to this thing of leadership. If you study the life of Joshua, you'll see before this moment, it's not like they reached out there and just grabbed this green guy and said, well, you're the leader. Joshua had moments of militarial campaigns and other opportunities of leadership before this moment, but they all pale in comparison to this moment. This is a new level of leadership that Joshua has not experienced yet. Moses is considered by most, even secular historians, as the greatest leader to ever walk the face of the earth. So these are big shoes to fill. This is a major task that is set before Joshua here. We also know this, he's not only following this amazing leader, but he's about to lead a group of people that God's own words described in this way, rebellious and stiff-necked. Well, that sounds enjoyable. The history of Israel at this point, even as a young nation, is one of not really being willing to follow leadership much. The whole reason Moses died and didn't get to go into the promised land is because the people wound him up so much, he was so mad, he hit the rock instead of speaking to it. You want water? Fine! Ugh. You ever feel that way about your kids sometimes? Go ahead and starve if you're not going to eat food then. Just get angry. And Moses is kind of acting that way towards the children of Israel. He's so sick of their rebellion and their stiff-neckedness. Even this great leader, Moses, he hits the rock and says, here's some water for you. He gets angry about it. And God didn't allow him to go into the promised land for that, as he messed up that illustration of speaking to the rock instead of he hit it. So these are not only big shoes to fill, but he's also having a people that are supposed to follow him that have not really been known for following very well. We also know this, that he's going into a big undertaking. He's not just leading this group of people in a small endeavor, he's leading them into the promised land, where just 40 years prior, the land had been described this way, a land where the giants were so big, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. So not only is Joshua filling big shoes, not only is he having people follow him that haven't really been known for following very well, but he's also undertaking a massive endeavor. He is attempting something great for God and expecting something great from God. And so this is a major thing that is happening here. So it's no wonder that God has to encourage Joshua to be strong and have courage. I would need that encouragement from God as well if those were the odds that were stacked against me. Now, we see clearly in the first 9 verses, like we did last week when we started this, that the reins of command have been passed not by happenstance, not by the people, not by an election, but by God. Now, that is very significant. We have to understand that it is God who has now taken the reins from Moses and has given them to Joshua. If we miss that point, then we're going to miss all that happens at the end of chapter 1. How the people respond and how Joshua takes the reins. Okay, this wasn't happenstance. This was God doing this. It tells us that very clearly in verse number 1. Chapter 1, verse 1 says, "The Lord spake unto Joshua." Verse number 5, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee." Verse number 9, "Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Now, all those verses help us understand this. God appoints Joshua to the position of leader over Israel. So now the question is, if that's God's man, how are the people going to respond? Are they going to follow him? Are they going to obey the Lord, or are they not? So it's a good question to ask, and we'll see how they follow up. So Joshua brings in the leadership. He tells us there in verse number 10 that Joshua commanded the officers of the people. Back in Exodus chapter number 18, they've come out of the land of Egypt. And you'll remember Moses is sitting all day long dealing with problems. The people would come to him, and Moses would deal with one problem, and then he would deal with the next. And he's pulling long hours. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes up and he goes, what you doing? This seems kind of exhausting. And Moses goes, it is. Trying to get the mind of the Lord for every one of these problems. And some of them seem so petty, and man, it's just exhausting. So he gets some great advice from his father-in-law, who tells him, well, why don't you just handle the big issues that really need you to handle them, and then kind of have a tiered leadership. So they set men over 1,000, they set men over hundreds, they set men over 50, they set men over 10. And so there were this leadership structure where information could flow down and information could flow up. So Moses, when he set this up, he could just meet with the leaders of the 1,000, and then in turn, those leaders of 1,000 would tell the 100, and so on, until there's somebody who's just telling 10. So they would meet with their leadership teams. This was broken down. In the other way, the other flow of it, if there was a problem that could be dealt with by the guy that's over 10, they would deal with it there. If not, it would be progressed to the one over 50, the one over 100, the one over 1,000. And then if it still didn't get solved, it would go to the Supreme Court, right? It would go to Moses. It was kind of like lower courts instead of always being taken to the main court there of Moses. So that's who it's talking about here in verse number 10. Joshua didn't set the system up, but he's sure going to utilize it. Joshua doesn't get all the people together. He calls in his officers. He calls in, what I would understand is this, those who are in charge of the thousands. So that's how the information would trickle down. So this command is going to go from Joshua to the thousands. Here's what he tells them to do. He gives them 3 instructions. The first one is this: prepare victuals. Now, just in case you think we're doing Beverly Hillbillies here, that is how that word is pronounced. I grew up, unfortunately, hearing it victuals. That is the wrong pronunciation. So you can learn something new from your King James Bible tonight. It's actually pronounced victuals. Jethro had it right from the Beverly Hillbillies all along. And so, but that basically means this: food and provision. Okay, we're about to go into the land, so start stockpiling. You got 3 days of preparation, which is the second thing he tells them. Prepare victuals. Second thing, you got 3 days of prep time. Then we're going to cross Jordan. Then he tells them this. The third thing is we're crossing Jordan to possess the land. So 3 instructions here. Prepare the food. You got 3 days. Then we're crossing Jordan. That's what he tells the instruction. That's what's supposed to be trickled down from the leadership on down. Now, before this text tells us the response of the people collective, the end of chapter 1 gives us the response of not just some of the people, it gives us the response of all 12 tribe collective. But before it gives us the response of the collective tribes of Israel, he deals specifically with the 2.5 tribes that don't have very much skin in the game. The ones who had the greatest temptation to rebel against leadership. Why are they the greatest propensity to rebel? Well, what's the deal with them? Well, Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh. You say, why only half? I have no idea. I don't know why half the tribe of Manasseh stayed and the other one didn't. I really don't know the answer to that. All I know is only half of them did. But if you remember, 40 years prior, God says we're going to go into the promised land, and there's 2.5 of the tribes, Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, who said, you know, we don't really want God's best for our life. We're kind of good with the subpar land that we got here. Are you sure? Yeah, we just raise cows anyways, and they'll be all right out here. It'll be good. Now, there's a whole other sermon right there about not just settling, but waiting for God's best, right? But you'll remember Moses told them this, if that's really what you want, God will give it to you. But when it comes time to take the land, you have to fight alongside with everybody else until they all have their land and have their houses like you got your houses, then you can go back home. So Joshua is coming to them saying, it's time, that promise, it's time to come due on that. It's time for you to follow through. Now, he says it twice in this text here, that the people, Gad, Reuben, and half-tribe Manasseh, have rest at this moment. Now, you can take that for what you want. The text defines it this way. They had houses, their wives and their children were established, their cattle was good to go. So when Joshua describes what rest looks like, it sounded like they were pretty established in their homes. They were good to go. There was no issues. There was no problems. And so when he's telling this, these 2.5 tribes, they had the greatest opportunity to rebel. They had the greatest reason to rebel against leadership. Oh, I know we said that years ago, but that's not convenient for us anymore. Oh, I know we said we'd go in and we would fight, but we can't leave our wives and our children and our houses now. We have them all. We need to take care of them. And so you have here this group of people that Joshua knows good and well have the greatest opportunity to rebel. And so he goes to them and reminds them of the vow and the promise that they have made, that they are to go and they are to fight and they are supposed to fulfill their obligation. Now, after he talks to them, we get the response of not just those 2.5 tribes, but we get the response of all of the people. Now, he tells us that in verses 16 through 18. There are 5 amazing responses that the people give. I'm going to go through these really quick. Here we go. The first one is this. They were all in, fully committed. The people were fully committed to the leadership of Joshua. They actually said it this way, all that thou commandest us, whithersoever thou sendest us, we'll go. We'll be there. We're in. We're all in. He's simply saying this, if you want us to go here, we'll go there. If you want us to do this, we'll do that. We're all in. We're not putting qualifiers on this. Well, we'll go this far, but we're not going to do that. Well, we'll do all this, but we won't go there. They jumped in and they said, we will go all in. We are all in for this thing. The second thing they did is they recognized the transfer of leadership. They recognized the transfer of leadership. Not only did they recognize the transfer of leadership, but they recognized its divine origin. These people weren't just saying that this was something that had happened by happenstance or by popular vote or by opinion. No, this was something that came from God, that God had placed his hand on Moses, and now he has placed his hand on Joshua. They actually tell him this. They say, according as we hearkened unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. That's powerful. Now, granted, they didn't do very well following Moses sometimes, but they were at least saying this, we recognize Moses was God's man, and we followed him that way, not perfectly, but we recognize you're God's man, and we're going to follow you. And so it's a powerful thing they said. The third thing, they prayed for leadership. They prayed for leadership. They said this, the Lord thy God be with thee as he was with Moses. They weren't sitting back there and going, I hate Joshua, I hope he dies. I wish ill on him. He's the worst leader ever. No, they simply said this, God was with Moses, and we're going to pray to the end that God will bless you like he blessed Moses. They wanted the best for his leadership. They wanted him to succeed. They were hoping he would do well, and they prayed for him to have success and prosper. The fourth thing they did, they wouldn't tolerate disobedience. They had seen what the previous generation had done in disobeying God and disobeying Moses, and they said this, we're not going to tolerate it. How far did they go? Well, they told Joshua this, if anybody's not going to follow your leadership, guess what their result is? Death. Now, just say before we even get to application here tonight, we will not be taking that extreme of a posture. But that's how they viewed it as a nation, where they said this, hey, if people are going to disobey and they're not going to follow leadership, then they don't need to be a part of this nation anymore. They're either going to live willingly or we're going to kill them. And that was their disposition towards it. He said, whosoever he be that rebel against thy commandment. Now remember, they're recognizing divine origin from leadership. So Joshua's leadership is coming from the Lord, okay? From the Lord to Joshua, to the thousands and down the way. So they say, if they disobey against God's commandment, against thy commandment, and will not hearken unto thy words in all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. Okay, number 5 is this. They said, Joshua, you lead, we'll follow. You lead, we'll follow. They ask him to do this. God has asked you to be strong and courageous, and so we're going to ask you to do the same thing, Joshua. Be strong and courageous in your leadership. We say it this way, go, we're with you. We got your back. We are applauding and we are supporting you. We are trying to accomplish a singular mission, and so we're not going to fight you in this way. We're going to follow that leadership. We are fully committed to this. You lead, we will follow. Now, the text shows us here clearly that the people of Israel responded to God's leadership through Joshua by believing God was with Joshua. So they recognize this. If Joshua is God's man, then we're going to follow Joshua, because by doing that, we're going to follow the Lord, because God put Joshua there. It doesn't mean Joshua was infallible. Joshua made mistakes. But they also recognized that he had a position of authority and leadership that came from God, and so they submitted to that leadership. So what is the timeless truth for us? It's this: follow faithful leadership. If God puts leadership in our lives, especially in a spiritual sense, which is what we're dealing with here, if God places leadership, and the leadership has a desire to not only obey the Lord, but to lead everyone else to obey the Lord, helping us, as Blackaby would say, come from our agenda onto God's agenda. That's really what spiritual leadership is helping people move from their own agenda onto God's agenda. If there's leadership in our life that's trying to move us in that way, then that means we ought to follow that kind of leadership. If God put that leadership there, and that leadership is being faithful in the position that God's given them, then there ought to be a submission and following of that leadership. So what does that look like? Let me give you a few application here. Well, first thing is this. It can be hard for leaders to be leaders. There's a reason why God told Joshua to not be scared like multiple times in chapter 1. Because Joshua is scared. He is taking the mantle from somebody who's done this for a long time, for 40 years, 40 years leading the children of Israel, and has been, by mark of many people, one of the greatest leaders that's ever walked the face of the earth. He's leading a people that, by and large, have been pretty stubborn. And not only that, but he's got a big task ahead of him. Now, I've recognized this in my own life a little bit, that leadership can be a scary thing sometimes. When I was a youth pastor, that was pretty easy. I thought it was hard at the time, until I became a pastor. And then I realized that it was really easy as a youth pastor when something difficult happened to go, oh, you need to talk to pastor about that. Then you become the pastor and you go, oh, you need to talk to... Oh, I guess you got to talk to me about that. There's some things that come up, especially in today's world. I know there's no new thing under the sun. But man, there's some stuff that comes up sometimes that's maybe not always known in the public eye of ministry, that sometimes as a pastor you scratch your head and you go, I don't know how to handle this. This is kind of big here. But you know God called you into the ministry. You know you're going to the ministry you're supposed to be at and to the people you're supposed to be at. You know you're supposed to say and do certain things. But sometimes it can be challenging to know, hey, especially for me. I've had the opportunity now to pastor 2 churches, in Kaufman for almost 8 years and now here for 2.5 years. And following, in my eyes, in my estimation, 2 men that retired that did it right. Not many men actually finished the course and go all the way through. And I'm thankful for Brother Freddie Pendleton, who I followed there in Kaufman, and of course Brother Webster, who I followed here. Men that would say this way, in many ways passing the mantle, and say this, well, I held the reins for Brother Freddie 30 years in Kaufman. He pastored there. Took the church through a brutal split, and man suffered in his own personal life because of it, of faults that were not his own, people in the church that did things. And then thinking about Brother Dale and the years that he spent here, 16 years that he was here as pastor and carried the mantle. That's being passed on. And you say this, oh, well, I got big shoes to fill, right? There's a mantle that's been passed. I better not mess it up because there's a history, there's a legacy that's being passed on. Also to say this, sometimes people can be rebellious. Now, with the children of Israel, not only was Joshua filling big shoes, but he also knew this. These people have had a history of not really following leadership very well. Now, I'm thankful to say I've never really pastored too much of obstinate people, but I have learned that sometimes obstinance is not the most difficult thing to a church. Outright rebellion can split a church. It can. But I think what's more detrimental to the church is not somebody who is outright rebellious against leadership. It's somebody who's indifferent about the work of God altogether. It's not that people hate the work of God. It's that people don't care about the work of God. That's really challenging as a leader. When you're sitting up sometimes and you're like, hey, let's do something for God and let's move forward and let's do this. And it's like people are back there and they're like, I really could care less. I could care less about and now they might not say it that way. It's not like they hate it. I mean, people are at church, they're filling their pew. But as far as actually advancing the kingdom of God and doing work of the ministry, sometimes people in their actions, it's almost like, I don't care. And that's evident by sometimes the actions. It's very difficult sometimes as a leader to deal with. Maybe not outright rebellious people, but sometimes people that can be indifferent towards the things of the ministry. I'll be honest with you, sometimes in a leader's mind can be filled with doubts, second-guessing, insecurity, fear, sadness about rebellion or indifference in people's hearts. I even told my wife yesterday, I've never struggled with anxiety in my life till about a year ago. Every once in a while, it just get a hold to me about ministry stuff. And just sometimes you just wake up in the middle of the night worried about this person or praying about this person. You just can't seem to get it off your mind, or some ministry and saying, man, did we make the right decision here? Are we moving in the right direction? And I tell you, sometimes in leadership, it can be scary. Like I say, and Joshua recognized that. But I do want to kind of give some application by way of the people and what they did. God's people in their response to leadership makes a huge difference in leadership, though. Huge difference. Growing up, I saw firsthand the frustration and disappointment in a pastor who at times, not all the time, but at times pastored a church that did not want to follow leadership. As a kid, I kind of got to see the behind-the-scenes look. I got to see the lead up to an announcement or to a new ministry and the excitement. I got to see the hours a pastor spent praying and working and investing and researching and doing all that needed to be done, and then presenting not a half-baked idea but a fully thought-through, prayed-about idea, and then to see the church dump cold water on it. Firsthand, I've been able to see that as a pastor's kid. So much so that when I took my first pastorate, we were doing something small, and I met with the men of the church, and I told them, I'd really like to do this. I've been praying about it, and I wanted to present this to you, we think. And one of the old men of the church grabbed me by the shoulder, and he looked me in the eye, and he goes, you're the pastor. You do what God wants you to do, and we'll follow you. And that blew my little mind. I had never experienced that before. Now, again, there's a church of about 20 people, so a little bit of a different scenario at that time. But growing up, I did see a lot of opportunities where it's interesting how people can hurt people on a degree and a level that almost can't be imaginable. And it's amazing where sometimes a pastor who's reaching out to care and love and lead and direct, you're not trying to be malicious. Sometimes it might feel that way. The pastor's just after you and trying to get you and beat you up and stuff. But I've seen just firsthand a pastor who lovingly reaches out and trying to guide and lead a church, and them biting back and dumping cold water, and how disappointing that can be. But I've also seen a church, like I already mentioned there, I've seen a church get on board with leadership direction and seeing what that does in infusing confidence and helping build where things are going. Now, I've seen amazing things that God can do with that. Now, how is that possible? What's the difference between a church that supports leadership and a church that is constantly questioning and denigrating and throwing cold water on leadership? What's the difference? Well, Joshua gave us 5 things. I want to run through them real quickly in application to how they apply to us, okay? How we can be people who follow leadership in the right way. First thing is this, be all in. If you're a member at Bible Baptist Church, be a member who's all in. Don't be like half in, half out, lukewarm. I mean, their attitude was this, we'll go all in, we'll go everywhere. Be a member who says this, we don't know how much we can do or how much we can be involved, but we're going to go as far as we can go. Have an attitude to get in, not to get out. Number 2, admit this, the leadership that God's put in place is God's man. Now, that's weird to say when I'm the one up here preaching right now, but I'll say this, I'm fully convinced, not partially, fully convinced that God was involved in the move of us coming here. Absolutely. I'm not a little bit convinced that, fully convinced, and I believe at least at the time when we came here, the church was convinced of that as well. And so understand this, if that is the case, we recognize this, well, then that was God who made that move. It wasn't trying to connive or manipulate or look, I mean, me and my wife weren't sitting in Kaufman being like, man, we need to really get out of this place. But, you know, we got a phone call and then things kind of progressed from there with a lot of prayer, a lot of other phone calls and a lot of questions. I mean, 6 months of preparation and praying and thinking before we even came here to candidate. And so we understand this, if God's involved with it, recognize I'm pretty much going to fail in every area of ministry because I'm a human. And so if there's going to be failure in leadership, it helps to recognize, hey, the leader was put there by the Lord. He's going to make mistakes. But know this, he's trying to do what God's called him to do to the best of his ability. And so, because sometimes it can seem like leadership maybe doesn't care about you or has forgotten you or isn't involved or whatever the case might be. Hebrews 13:17 says, obey them that have the rule over you and submit yourselves. For they watch for your souls as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that's unprofitable for you. The third thing is this, pray for leadership. Amen. If you don't walk away with anything else from tonight, I hope you'll get this. Boy, I need your prayers. All the leadership, Brother Garrett needs your prayers, Brother Gary needs your prayers, those that are involved in any aspect of leadership in the church, especially me and my family. I tell you, Satan can find ways. If he can get the leader, he can get the church. It's the unfortunate reality of it, and it's not me praying because I'm selfish for the prayers or I want them more than somebody else, maybe feel like I need them more than somebody else, but I do recognize I am a fallen man, and recognize that I'm not above sin or above problems or above my family falling apart. And I don't want those things. I will strive to do right, but I also know this, I need prayer. Because Satan knows if he can get the leadership, he can get the entire church and destroy it. And so we want that. We need the prayers there. The fourth thing is this, prevent discord. Joshua's attitude was this, or the people's attitude toward Joshua was this, if people are not going to follow your leadership, we're going to kill them. Now, we're not going to go that far. But I would say this, it would be wonderful if we had that attitude towards discord and dissension within the church, that when it gets to you, it dies. Amen. Right? Sometimes you can't prevent it from being transmitted to you, but you can say this, I'm not passing that along to anybody else. And we can be of the mindset of saying, you know, not everything we hear in the grapevine is probably necessarily real or reality, and maybe it's been inflated or it's been blown up. And so we say this, hey, if there's something that comes through of dissension, man, can you believe that Brother Garrett did this? You know, or can you believe that Gary led the singing that way, or preacher did that? Understand, hey, yeah, we probably made a mistake. We're human, right? But man, discord and the coffee tabletop conversations that drift in that direction, how devastating they can be to a church. Because something that's this small can be this big. They can get blown up. And so if it comes to you, have the attitude the people had, it's going to die with me. Not the person, but the information, right? I'm going to let that stop here. And then the fifth thing was this, communicate your willingness to follow spiritual leadership. It's one thing to say I'm all in your heart. It's another thing for leadership to hear that. I had a rude awakening when I became a pastor that for 4 years I had been the second man underneath my father and had not been a good second man. Not because I didn't do the work or wasn't diligent in trying to do what I was supposed to do or had been bad in any way, but I recognize this, how many times I didn't encourage and support and, you know, like Moses was up on the mountain, hold his arms up. and recognizing my role was not to build a ministry. My role was to help him build a ministry, and how often I had failed at that. I didn't realize that till I became a pastor and realized how much that's needed. And I'll tell you, there's something about folks coming along and, if you will, holding the arms up or propping the arms up of leadership who's saying this, hey, where you're going, we're going. You're leading the church in this direction, and we're going there with you. We're following you. We're all in with this thing. And to hear that and to have that confidence that there's a church behind it who's saying this, it's not just the mind of God for the pastor, it's the mind of God for the church. That when there's that fellowship, it's an amazing, amazing thing. You know, spiritual leadership ought to be the right kind of leadership. And I will guarantee this to the church, to the best of my ability, I want to follow the Lord and lead as He's leading me. To the best of my ability, I want to do that. I will fail, and there will be hiccups along the way. But I'll say this, if spiritual leadership is spiritual leadership that's placed there by God, then there ought to be not only a desire, but a follow-through of the people to follow that leadership, whoever it is. Whoever God has an authority and a position of authority at Bible Baptist Church, if that has been put there by God and they're leading the church onto God's agenda and onto God's pathway of where the church ought to be heading, we say this, we say, I'm going to follow that. I'm on board with that. I'm going to get behind it. And that was Joshua. And I'll say this, the success of the book of Joshua is due, not in part, but in whole, to that attitude. What we find in chapter 1, a leader who recognized his role under God, and also a people who recognized their role under the leadership of Joshua. And with that, it was like the miner who, when they got to the bottom expecting tragedy, there were 33 men that came out. We can accomplish great things for God and expect great things for God when we follow God's pattern of leadership from the top down, how God designed it to work within the New Testament church. Well, let's all stand together as we come to a time of invitation here tonight. Father, I do pray that you will bless Bible Baptist Church. Lord, I'm so thankful, Lord, that there's a people here who have had good leadership and have followed that leadership. And Lord, how you have blessed this ministry because of that. Lord, I don't want to fumble that. Lord, I've been handed a important thing, a valuable thing. And Lord, I pray you'd help me not to fumble. Lord, I pray that you'd help us as a church to submit to and follow godly leadership. And Lord, I pray that whoever that might be, if it's us here for years and years, or you bring somebody else along, Lord, that we would submit to that leadership and recognize God put His man here. He's leading us onto God's agenda. Help us to follow Him. And so, Father, may you bless this invitation. We love you. It's in your name we do pray. As the music plays, if the Lord's spoken to your heart here tonight, won't you respond?
I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. Jesus paid it all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, He washed it white as snow. Lord, now indeed I find thy power and thine alone can change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone. Jesus paid it all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, He washed it white as snow. For nothing good have I, whereby thy grace to claim. I'll wash my garments white in the blood of Calvary's Lamb. Jesus paid it all to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, He washed stone.
Well, amen. You can be seated, teenagers, if y'all want to head out for your prayer meeting. That'd be good. We go over a few prayer requests here tonight. I say a few. We've actually got quite a bit. I'll give you an update on a